誰だお前は。地獄からの使者、スパイダーマン。
Hello my friends and welcome back to Player Display. This time around we are continuing with my pile of loot from Big Bad Toy Store and moving on to a Marvel Legends release that just came out. This time we have a Spider-Man, but this ain't your classic Peter Parker or Miles Morales. This is the Japanese Toei TV series SUPAIDAMAN from the 60s, I believe. I pretty much unboxed everyone that I showed was in that pile of loot, but I decided to keep this guy in because he is in that new green packaging that I think everybody wants to have at least one look at. On the front, of course, they have a good picture of the emissary of evil Spiderman, and he looks absolutely bombastic and very, very different from usual Spider-Mans we've expected. My only experience with this version of Spider-Man is, of course, all the memes on the internet, and just before this review, I watched the pilot episode, all the episodes of which are free on YouTube if you really have nothing else to do with your time, and oh man, it's something else, I'll tell you that. It's absolutely everything you want it to be, and more. Greatest Spider-Man show of all time. Okay, get a good look at our not Peter Parker on the front. As you can see here, there's a very distinct difference. He does not have web shooters, he has a web gauntlet, sort of. Again, I'm new to the show, so I don't know all the new vocabulary and terminologies that comes with this Spider-Man, so you'll have to forgive me if I leave anything out from the lore or anything. Down here we have, which I can only imagine says Spider-Man in Japanese. On this side we have a really nice profile image of Spider-Man. This is one of his trademark poses from the TV show. On this side we have the figure again, more vanilla pose, kind of just standing there chilling out. On the back you have another pose for the figure, again another very iconic pose for this particular version of Spider-Man, along with his 5 accessories being 2 web splat effects, a web shooting out, and then 2 fists to accompany his 2 kind of loose, gripping, semi-relaxed hands. I don't know, it could be anything. And I also really like the artwork that's going on in the back there. On the top, if I could flip this box the right way, we have Spider-Man 60 Amazing Years. I think we're past 60 at this point, but whatever. It's a nice graphic. I like that a lot. I also really like this half face of Spider-Man that we've been seeing on these green boxes. On the bottom, nothing to see here, nothing I can read, so we're just going to skip that. Down here on the bottom of the box, we get our usual case of
sword onions.
And paying off to the side, we have, of course,
I am Superman.
Green Arrow.
Aslan.
C.
Oh, this one's new. Let's just call this one
You.
Canada.
One new one.
And lastly,
EAC.
now let's pull the camera back so we can do our usual tried and true unboxing. So we have one right there. We got your usual little slot. Pop that open. Wait a minute. Well, there's tape down there. Jeez, okay. So much for green, huh? And then here is where the controversy begins. Now, before we unwrap our Spider-Man from his body bag, let's first discuss why this packaging is so controversial. The first thing is pretty obvious. We're pretty accustomed to having boxes that usually have a plastic window where you can actually see the figure on the inside. And that might not be a big deal to new collectors, but for well-seasoned collectors like myself who've been collecting for about a decade, it's kind of important that you see the figure before you purchase, so that way you can check for any QC issues, maybe something's missing or whatever. That's actually not a big deal for me because personally I like ordering figures online anyways. I'm not gonna jingle all the way that shit. I'm not gonna go out and find that very specific turbo guy or anything like that. At the same time, I kind of like this packaging. It takes me back to like the late 90s Star Wars figures in the Power of the Force line where everything was kind of just covered in cardboard, bagged up very cheaply, had some little plastic gimmicks and whatever all over the place to keep everything where it's supposed to be. But yeah, this is pretty much what you expect from the green packaging. You got sort of this cardboard bracket system, whatever the hell you want to call it. You have a little goodie bag that popped out of here. Then you have Spiderman in a body bag. Yeah! So let's go ahead and slide him out. This is so weird. I don't know, I kind of like this tangible experience. For me, it feels like you're opening candy, you know? This is a little goodie bag. So we got our first long web there. Dumping out this bag here. I think I've got everybody. Be sure that you do a clean sweep of each bag before you discard it so you're not missing anything. And now, of course, who else could be in here but our favorite version of Spider-Man of all time. And here he is. And, ooh, I like the colors on this guy. Okay, so here's the thing. I knew as soon as I ordered this figure that I was going to love it. It's just totally campy and weird and way out of left field. It was never a blip in my mind that Marvel Legends would ever pick up this interpretation of our favorite web slinger. But the thing that gets me is the color palette and the fact that, yeah, every Spider-Man figure is basically a guy in a suit, but this looks like a guy in a suit on Halloween. They did something with this figure. I guess it's between the color choices and the sculpt work that makes this costume feel very cheap, very baggy, almost like you ordered it on Wish. And that's what makes me love this figure so much. For those of you who don't actually know who Spiderman is, basically it was a pretty successful TV series that ran in the 1960s in Japan, and that was the very first live-action Spider-Man we've ever seen. And I guess I don't want to insult anyone by trying to go into the deep lore because I don't know it that well, but the best way I could say it is that, you know that whole with great power comes great responsibility? Like this box, throw it right in the trash, because that is not what this guy is about. He is out for revenge. Apparently his father was killed by a dude called Professor Monster, and then there's powers from a planet called Planet Spider that gives him this gauntlet which bestows upon him the power of the Spider People or something like that. Like, he is known for having a very big Power Rangers style mech, or like Voltron or something like that. And I think he also holds a gun at one point. So yeah, this is not Peter Parker at all. Again, I just watched the pilot, and yeah, I'm watching the rest because it's too amazing for me to shut it off. I'm going to go ahead and shut up because I am in a perpetual state of joy whenever I'm looking at this figure. We have a head sculpt which absolutely sells this figure. A very notable difference between this Spider-Man and, of course, you know, you got your Garfield, you got your Holland, you got your Maguire, is with those masks, they were very streamlined. For him, from the profile, one of perhaps his trademarks is that you can make out the face bulging through the cloth of the mask, and then you can sort of make out a little bit of a mouth going on in there. So that just really adds to the campiness of the Spider-Man. Basically, this is what Adam West's Batman would be to the Marvel Universe. You also got the very squinty eyes, which are very prototypical Spider-Man, and I really love the red that they did. It's very pale, very worn. It feels cheap, and it works for this figure. Going around to the back, you get a continuation of that web design, which is all printed up, which again makes sense for this particular character. And I noticed, going from the body and all the way down, I'll just mention it this one time though, is that there are some breaks within the web design. I don't know if they're intentional or not. I'm leaning more towards the former, and it adds to that really hokey cheesiness of this suit. It feels like he's not wearing a costume, he's wearing a sack. Then we got, of course, every Spider person needs that logo, and it feels very Steve Ditko. It feels very classic Spider-Man, so this is kind of accurate to the original design, even though the story is absolutely not. On the back, of course, you get your usual blue, as you'd expect, and then you get a pretty classic traditional Spider logo in red. On the arms, pretty much what we expect, but I don't know what they did. They did something with the shoulders that make it seem very clean. Like, it just seems to kind of smoothen right into the arm, almost seamlessly. It's very flush. And then you get your usual traditional blue merging with the red and the webs going down to the hands. Over here, you don't get a whole lot else. You just get the webs and the hand, and that's kind of the end of the story. But over here, you have a mainstay of this particular design, which is his little planet spider bracer thing. There are no whipping hands at all, which is accurate to the show, because all the webs come out of this gauntlet. This hand does nothing at all, pretty much. Getting up closer, you can make out some really nice yellow and silver details. I think it was a lot more chrome in the show, but this works. Again, it helps with that hokiness and campiness of the rest of the suit. The one thing that I wish they did is maybe have it flip open. Again, it's a pretty small piece, so it would be a little difficult, but I guess they could have gone out of their way to include an extra one that does have an open flap, so that would have been really nice. And that's how he sort of calls in his mech, and then he has to call out what web he's doing before it shoots out of his hand, which it just makes the show so much fun. It's an absolute gas. And then going down, not much else too special. It continues with that same pale red, and then you also have that good, not quite stark blue. It's pretty neutral. It's not too light, not too dark, right in the middle, looking very good. And on the back, you do have a very nicely detailed web pattern going on across the waist, so I like that quite a bit. And for the basic looks of this figure, that's all we have. No alternate head, unfortunately. This show is decades old, so odds are Marvel at the moment doesn't have the rights to the actor that originally portrayed him, so I don't think an unmasked head sculpt was to be expected anyways. Okay, this just got a lot more interesting. I was preparing to lay out all the accessories, but when you look really closely at the bracer here, it blatantly says Spider-Man right on the gauntlet, which, oh man, the more I stare at this figure, the more I enjoy it. It's such a delight. Okay, now that I have the two hands and the gauntlet removed, we have a good look at a pretty decent showing of accessories. So we have two web splat effects. We have a smaller one here, and then we have a much wider one. And the reason why these are so stark white is because contrastingly to these molds, which we've seen before, and when they previously showed up with other spider people, is those ones were a clear translucent plastic, and in this case they're flat white. That's because in the show, they were very obviously like just a rope. Like, they went through no effort to give it an organic effect. It's just a straight up lasso sort of deal. Speaking of lasso, that brings us over to this other accessory, which we've seen several times by now. And we can have a closer look at his relaxed hands right here, which are very well printed, and they maintain that color continuity. And he also comes with two fists for some brawling action, also very well textured with the webs, all very symmetrical, which I like a lot, again with that pale red. And then lastly, we already kind of gave this a good look, but the gauntlet is here and it is removable. Now as for these flat-out web accessories, they're a little bit tricky to work with. You kind of have creative license as to whatever you want to do with them, whether you get some poster tack and then just plug it onto someone's face or use putty or something like that. But for me, kind of what I've come to do is get an open hand on a Spider-Man figure and then kind of plug in the fingers around it, and yeah, there we go. And that kind of gives it the illusion that he's shooting out a web. Ooh, actually, that feels very comic book. I like that a lot. Now, as for the web swing piece, I can't say that I've always loved it. I've usually just opted for a custom wire bendy substitute, but I suppose if you'd like to get it on this figure, there's a little hoop on the end. You can kind of push it back so it kind of slings around the gauntlet, even though that doesn't really work. And it looks like he's kind of shooting it out from beneath. Then it kind of just kind of limp falls down. So I don't love this accessory, but again, I got a substitute that will be a little bit better than that. In fact, very quickly, here he is with one of my custom wired webs. I like that just a lot more. You pretty much just pop off the hand, there's a little loop at the end, and you saw the hand back on, then you could pose it any way you want. So now we can have it spinning out or something like that. Even though it didn't really do that, it kind of just kind of shot out and hit whatever it hit. Plenty of tutorials online. I'm actually out of this wire, but if I ever get more, then I'll do a tutorial myself to show you how I do it. And then lastly, here he is with his two fisted hands, which give him a little bit more of that Spider-Man shtick going on with those really bombastic poses. One thing that I neglected to mention is that not only is this entire body obviously a new sculpt, but it is also 100% pinless, and it looks very streamlined and pretty. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to articulation, which is pretty much what we expect, but it's exactly what you want for this guy. For the head, he's got a good swivel going on. He can go all the way down. Wow, that's really good. Very much up. He can also not really much to the side, because it has a little bit in there. No butterfly shoulders, not that he really needs them. He's not particularly agile. Actually, a lot of the show is him just running around on foot, but the shoulders go all the way around. If you listen close, there is definitely a good ratchet joint inside, which I always like personally. They go out, and they still, again, maintain that really nice shape. Go back in, bicep swivel. Got a double hinged elbow, which comes way past 90. All the hands swivel and hinge out and back in. As for the torso, you got an ab crunch that goes pretty far forward and not a whole ton back. Down on the legs, they kick perfect 90 forward. They do a little bit back, which is not too bad. They kick to the side, not quite 90, but solid. There's a thigh swivel. Knees, they're double jointed, but you kind of need to baby the lower joint a little bit. There we go. And then, yeah, that goes all the way back, further than we probably even need for this figure. No swivel at the calf, which it's not a big deal, but I would have liked to have a swivel somewhere around here. As for the ankles, they go that far back, that far up, and then they have very, very good rocker. Now to start off with some size comparisons, or more in this case, a color comparison. We have him beside my head-swapped Spider-Man and also Spider-Gwen from Spider-Verse, and he looks totally and appropriately out of place. He looks very much like a bootleg Spider-Man, which is exactly how he should feel. Now, while I can only assume that he never ever meets a classic Spider-Man Rogues gallery, since I'm still watching through the rest of the show, here he is anyways with Green Goblin and then our tentacle-modded Doc Ock. Now to compare him with some other lines, we have the Disney Parks exclusive McQuarrie Darth Vader, along with NECA's Invisible Man with custom soft goods who we just looked at. And then lastly, here he is besides everybody's favorite Pilf Muck Muck.
Web shooter.
Aww. I don't know why I get such a nostalgic feeling when looking at this Emissary from Hell SUPAIDAMAN figure. I mean, obviously I didn't grow up with the show, I wasn't alive in the 60s, and even though I was a 2000s kid, I never actually knew the show existed until perhaps the 2010s, and I literally just started watching it today. Here I am, a 23-year-old man playing with the toy. But there's something about the color palette, the hokiness, the sculpt work, the bagginess, that brings me back a little bit to like those really cheesy, campy, like Power Rangers shows, Kamen Riders, another one. It's a totally ridiculous and bombastic show, and everything they did with this figure totally emulates that. I really like this figure. It just has this sensation of charm that I haven't really felt with the figure before in a long time, so I'm going to be fiddling with him quite a bit before I actually put him on my shelf. So if you enjoyed what you were watching today...
This is the editor speaking. Once again, I am very sorry to interrupt your program, but I must show you this now. As you can see, I am currently processing the Spider-Man video, which was put in with a lot of heart and effort, and it is meant to be one of the best episodes within Podguy's channel. However, unfortunately, because I am provided with inferior software, I had to do this video twice over. That meant I had to do the entire video with all the cuts, all the audio edits, and only for all of it to crash and obliterate before my eyes. The absolute outrage is that I had to spend an extreme amount of additional hours throughout the night to build this video once more from scratch. And what am I receiving for this? Absolutely nothing from Podguy. No compensation, no reward, no pat on the back. Podguy once again proves that he very much mistreats his staff and anyone who he considers a friend, because he's a man with no friends, only peasants and lackeys for him to kick around in the dirt. And I, unfortunately, am subject to being one of such entities for him to step on. So this video will process, and you will enjoy it. In fact, I forbid you from not enjoying it. If you dislike it, I can only conclude that there is something incomprehensibly wrong with your brain, and I suggest that you be examined as soon as possible. Appreciate this video, or there will be fire. The editor has spoken.
Then please, as per usual, be sure to
Like.
comment
And subscribe.
Oh, suffer the little children. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you're having a fantastic week, and I will see you all later. Oh my god, I love this figure. just the fact that the show takes itself so seriously and it's not meant to be a parody, it's supposed to be its own isolated thing, is what makes this what would otherwise just be a basic lame Jane. Lame Jane, there's Mary Jane, I'm not funny. But it's what would otherwise be a basic Star Wars figure. What? It's basically what would be a basic Spider-Man figure, but it's a parody, like unintentionally, like a real-world accidental parody of who we know Spider-Man to be. But again, he's not supposed to be doing a whole bunch of backflips. Pretty much what they do is they do jump cuts between still shots of him to sort of simulate the fact that he's moving a lot, but he really isn't. So, yeah, again, watch the damn show. It is such a ride. This is Spider-Man, but it ain't your Peter Parker.
Web shooter. Web shooter. Web shooter. Web shooter. Web shooter. Web shooter. Web shooter.